Tom asked that I start the webinar.
Thank you. I just turned my video off so that nobody thinks the meeting's actually going.
Okay, I guess he's getting a message asking if he's the meeting host.
Isn't Tom the host? Or maybe you?
Yeah, I'm gonna see what I can do here.
I'm seeing a couple of people on the attendees list.
Yeah, it's because we use a shared account that it's not allowing Tom to join for some reason. He asked that I start the webinar working with him through Teams. Sorry about this.
Yeah, can you get to, can he get to another way to participate in the meeting?
Yeah, I'm going to send him the link and then promote him as a panelist, I think.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks. I'd be a little bit worried there.
There he is.
Hi, Rich. And there's Tom. Okay.
Hi, Carolyn.
Just be aware the meeting hasn't started, but it is recording, just so you know.
Okay.
Hey, Michael.
Hi.
We're recording, but we haven't started the meeting, just so you know.
Okay.
Technical difficulties.
Exactly. But Leah and Tom were amazing, and I found out a way to defeat it. So we're good. Hard to believe a week ago we were in t-shirts, and now we're in sweaters.
Yeah, it was like flip the switch. Fall is here. Yeah.
Like right on the first day of fall, just boom. Pretty reliable.
Hey, Leah, could you promote Crosby to a panelist?
Sure thing.
So Carolina is only going to be with us for a moment, I think. And she's asked Robin to kind of fill that, represent the county at the meeting. So I'm a little worried that we may not have a quorum. Because right now you've just got Michael and me. Has anybody heard?
Councilmember Madrone plans to be here.
She will be here. Okay, good. All
Yeah.
right. That'll give
Pro Tem Gilman is not able to make it, as I understand, but Danny is planning to come.
And I'm sorry, who was it that can't be here?
Clark Gilman.
Oh, Clark. Okay. All righty. Hi, Talana. Elisa. Kaven. Want to let everybody know that we are recording now, but the meeting hasn't officially started. So just be aware.
So Carolyn, even without Carolina, is that 3 out of 5? So long as Councilmember Madrone is here, we're fine for quorum,
Yeah.
right?
We should be good. Yeah. Yeah. It was just looking a little lonely with the two of us, Michael. So, oh, here comes Carolina. Great. And Elisa, did you get the my edits on the document that you requested? Okay, good.
Yes, thank you.
Good.
It's ready.
All righty. Well, Carolina has joined us, and I know she's out of state and has stuff to deal with. So it is 4 o'clock. Why don't we go ahead and get our meeting started? And at this point in the meeting, we are lacking a quorum. We're hoping that that is going to change momentarily.
You do have a quorum, Chair Cox. Brian Hess
Wait.
from Yelm is here,
Oh, okay. I didn't see him come in. Thank you.
and Councilmember Madrone just joined.
This is so awesome. And it's still 4 o'clock. Okay. So let's get going. We've got agenda approval, and then we'll do howdies. Can I have a motion to approve today's agenda?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Danny.
Second.
Carolina seconds. Okay. All in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. All right, so welcome and check-ins. I'd like to start with Carolina because her time is short, and she'll let you know what's going on her end and welcome any staff.
Thank you. Carolina Mejia, Thurston County Commissioner. And today with Thurston County, we have Tom Webster as well as Keely Marino, and we have Leah. And Robin Campbell will be joining us here shortly, and she is our new interim county manager, and she's actually going to be holding the baton today for Thurston County as well as Tom and Keely. So thank you so much for your support on that.
Well, thank
That is
you.
all.
Thank you
And,
for joining us from all the way across the country.
and sorry, Chair Cox, if I may jump in, I also wanted to introduce Crosby Carter, who is Thurston County's new Affordable Housing Program Manager, who's just joined us as well.
Thank you. Sorry,
Sorry.
Crosby, did not see you.
Yeah.
All right, well, welcome Crosby. Didn't realize you had a new role already, so good to have you here. All right, let's go to Tumwater.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Michael Althauser, Tumwater City Council. I'm joined by Brad Medrud from our planning department. And also Councilmember Joan Cathy will be joining in about 10 minutes, currently en route to her remote workstation.
All right, thank you, Michael. Now let's go to Olympia.
Hi, everybody. Danny Madrone with the Olympia City Council, and I see Rich Hoy, Darian Lightfoot, and Jacinda Stelgis are joining us from city staff today.
Great. All righty. Thank you. Let's go to Yelm. Brian?
There we go. Brian Hess, Yelm City Council member. I'm here, and I think, let me check and see if he's with us. I think Gary is with us. Just a moment. Nope. It's just myself right now. So I'm here from Yelm.
Great. Well, we're glad you're here, Brian. Thank you. And from Lacey, I have myself from City Council, and we have Mayor Andy Ryder on the line. And I'm hoping we may be joined by a staff member, but I don't see him yet. So that's what we've got. Have we missed any? Well, let's welcome Talana.
Welcome to Lana.
Well,
I'm the chair of the Affordable Housing Advisory Board.
okay, thank you. And let's see, do we have our other chair?
Yeah, Haven is
Haven?
here.
Yeah. Kevin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. I'm the current acting chair for the Homeless Services Advisory Board.
Great, welcome. And I see that Robin Campbell, the county's interim manager, has joined us as well. Robin, would you like to say a quick hello?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robin Campbell, and I'm the interim county manager. And I see that Commissioner Mejia is here for a few minutes. I think.
Yeah, she's still on, but not
Great.
for long.
All right, thank you.
All righty, well, welcome and congratulations or commiserations, whichever is more appropriate on the new role. That's great. And welcome to our meeting.
Glad to be here today.
Yeah, wonderful. So can I have a motion to approve the August 23rd minutes?
So moved.
Awesome. I'll second it. All in favor? Please
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
Okay, good. We got that done. Do we have anybody signed up for public comment?
No one
Okay.
has registered for public comment, no.
Good. Well, we just gained 8 minutes. This is wonderful. All righty. And next up is long-term funding strategy for Quince Street, and that's Darian.
Thank you, Chair Cox. I'm going to kick it over to Rich Hoy. He's going to take over the presentation. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair Cox, members of the committee. Rich Hoy, I'm Assistant City Manager for City of Olympia. I just first wanted to say thank you to Thurston County for considering the city's request for financial support for operating costs at Quince Street Village. So we talked about that at the last RHC meeting. And we very much appreciated the unanimous support from the RHC related to that request, just recognizing Quince Street Village is an important regional facility for serving the unhoused across our county. So we were asked to come and talk a bit more about the long-term plan for Quince Street Village and how we're looking at sustainable funding there. So I'll speak to that tonight. So first off, it's important to recognize that Quince Street Village is a temporary facility. So it was approved under emergency housing waiver process. And we really view that as a facility that will serve our region for approximately the next 3 years. The plan for the Quince Street Village site is for that site to eventually be transitioned from a temporary tiny home village, emergency shelter, to permanent affordable housing. So we do plan to go vertical with permanent housing on that site. So with that timeline in mind, we're really looking at how do we maintain operations and funding. Really, the critical period is looking at 2024 through 2026. At this time, what we're planning on is a combination of funds. So right now, the facility costs the city about $1.37 million under the current contract. That will go up over the next few years with inflation. So in round numbers, we're planning on approximately $1.5 million per year is what we're going to need. So I'm just using that, in round figures for tonight. So our plan is to be able to fund it through 3 primary sources and roughly 1/3 equal parts coming out of the city's home fund operating dollars, which we're using now. Regional funds through the RHC. So we do intend to make requests in the upcoming years for regional funds through the RHC process, looking at the countywide home fund dollars. The funding that we've requested this year for Quinn Street Village that the county's considering, that will help us address 2024. So we'd be looking at 2025 and 2026 funding in future cycles. We're also planning to make a request to the state to allocate a number of the units at Quinn Street Village to house those that either are currently or had previously been residing on state right-of-way. So our request in the upcoming, the current NOFA that the Department of Commerce has put out will be to request $500,000 annually for the next couple of years for Quinn Street Village. So we're looking at a combination of state funds, regional funds, and city funds. And we also will be, we continue to be opportunistic, and we're going to be looking at other grant opportunities and other ways to fund the facility. If we're successful with additional grants, then we would reduce the request to regional home fund dollars, so the countywide home fund dollars. So those dollars would be the last in, is what we would envision. So we'll continue to look at other opportunities. So really, our plan right now is to look in the 2026-2027 timeframe for the transition period where we'll be planning to move towards permanent affordable housing on that site. And with that, I'll open to any questions, unless Darian, is there anything you would add to what I just shared? Okay, great.
Anybody have questions?
Carolina had her hand up.
Thank you. Oh, can I go ahead, Chair Cox? You are on mute.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, I apologize. I'm on a street. So my question, Rich, is in regards to, you mentioned there were going to be monthly requests for the Regional Housing Council home fund dollars, and I'm just wondering, instead of making those requests, isn't it better to just, as a Regional Housing Council, set aside those dollars? That way there is a plan, right? And if there's other grants that come in, that's great, but at least that funding is set aside and not allocated to some other project where then we're just having to kind of be in these emergency situations where we're trying to find the funding. So I'm just wondering, is it better not to just go ahead and set the funding aside, now, and then just, if it's required, then that's fine, but if it's not, great, right? Like, I think it's better to have additional money in the backside of things than not to have like any funding at all to be able to kind of cover this.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, from the city's perspective, that would be terrific. So we would be looking at requests to help us address anticipated needs in 2025 and 2026. And so if we can plan on that and set aside dollars from the region, if we don't end up needing them, great. But if we're able to set aside those dollars, that would work very well from our perspective.
Thanks, Rich. Andy Ryder and then Robin.
Yeah, I just have a question. So I'm very supportive of this project. Obviously, it's much needed. I was just wondering, since this is regional housing dollars going in, at least for the next couple of years, what is the process from the other jurisdictions like Lacey to be able to refer people to Quinn Street? right? If the whole regions is helping out with the financing, obviously Tumwater and county and whatever should be able to refer people to Quinn Street.
Cool.
So is there a process that will be in place to allow that to happen?
Thanks for the question, Mayor Ryder. I see Darian has her hand up. I'll just say right now, the process we're doing intakes through coordinated entry, which is that is following a countywide process. So we're having intakes that are coming from across the county from all the jurisdictions fed in through coordinated entry. So that in our minds that's really addressing the regional need. Darian, is there anything you would add to that?
Yeah, just to say that that's how the site has been operating for the past year. Unhoused folks from Lacey or Tumwater or the county have been going to Quinn Street for the past year because intakes have been through coordinated entry. Yes.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Robin, I think you were next.
Thank you. So my question is almost the opposite of Commissioner Mejia's. What happens if you are not successful in obtaining the grants from the state?
Yeah, that's a good question, Robin. We are confident. I can't guarantee it at this point that we'll be successful with those funds, but we are confident based upon preliminary conversations with the state. And so if that's not successful, then that's a conversation that we'll need to have with our council in terms of how we address gaps. But we've already informed the state that we intend to apply and allocate units at Quinn Street Village to support right-of-way work, and the initial response was positive. We'll know more soon on that as well.
Yeah, and
yeah.
that's wonderful, but I've heard the governor say that all of the right-of-way funding has been committed. So if it's right-of-way funding, then this project might be part of that commitment, but if it's not, then it's going to be difficult to get the money from that particular source.
Well, there's a current notice of funding availability that's out right now that we're going to speak to later on the agenda. And so, and there have been funds that have been allocated for Thurston County. And so we're actually hoping to be able to request more than those dollars. So we've had preliminary conversations based upon that, and the reception has been positive thus far. So there is funding set aside, and we're hopeful we're going to get our share of it.
Thank you, and thank you for tolerating these questions since I am new to this group. So thanks.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Brian has his hand up.
Sorry,
Yes.
I was muted. I was just calling on Brian.
Okay, my question is, it's kind of complicated, I think. As you know, with what's been going on with King County, Snohomish County, various communities have been putting no camping bans. The only way that the no camping ban can be enforced is if there is housing available for the people, or else it does no good. Is this going to be something, as asked earlier, that can be used for all of Thurston County, or is it just for those that are in the right of way? And to preface this, Yelm has a no camping ban, and that is why I'm asking this question.
I see Keely's put her hand up. Keely, were you wanting to respond to that?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you for that question. I have one return question, which is for not necessarily for now, but just ongoing, a question around the legality of camping bans with Martin v. Boise. Just one, we don't, just want to put that out there. But then also, we have an MOU with the state that through these right-of-way funds, or this new NOFA is actually ERP, which is the encampment relocation program, but it's right-of-way. That once everyone has been located from the right-of-way, then we will, the next priority will be those on the coordinated entry list. So if for some reason there are no people from the right-of-way to be placed in these units, they will be prioritized for folks from the coordinated entry master list.
Darian?
Darian, did
Yes,
you want
and
to speak to the number of units that we're anticipating would be set aside at Quinn Street?
yeah, that's what I was gonna add, is that there are 100 units at Quinn Street right now. And so for the right-of-way portion, that's a third of the units that we're looking to set aside, so 30 units. And so there are 70 other units that are available all through coordinated entry. So yeah, the specifics paid by the state directed for right-of-way specific. If those remain open and there aren't folks on the right-of-way, open to coordinated entry, and the 70 other units are still working through the coordinated entry process.
All right, Brian, is that an old hand or a new question?
Just kind of a follow-up. I'm just trying to make sure that I understand in reference to this, and it's because Seattle's city attorney, along with a variety of others, are asking the circuit court to relook at it. I understand the ruling, and I understand the camping bans are very difficult to enforce. And I'm just trying to figure out, because again, we're going to have as I said, I don't know how many others in Thurston County have no camping bans, but I know that if Yelm starts trying to enforce it, and I already know that we can't because we don't have anything in Yelm for temporary housing or emergency housing. And that's why I'm asking is if that can also be used, and if so, how do we get coordinated with that so that we can have the list and be able to reach out and say, hey, we've got somebody, they would like temporary housing, and what can we do to make it happen?
Who wants to take that one? Keely?
Yeah.
The quick answer is that those individuals would have to go through the coordinated entry intake and assessment process, and they'd be put on the list, and then through the coordinated entry process would be offered housing as it became available at the point in which they are on the list. So that would be the quick answer.
And could he contact you a little later, Keely, if he needs more information about how to access that?
Sure. Yes.
Okay, great. All right, Danny.
Thank you for, I was going to say, thank you for answering my questions and putting up with it. Thank you.
Danny?
So I guess what I'm hearing from the group is like general support with this approach, knowing that we don't yet know what's going to happen with the Commerce dollars. Rich, can you tell us what is the timeline to know from Commerce?
Well, I think it's October 25th, is it, Darian, of the deadline under the NOFA? Isn't that correct?
That's when the application is due. We're looking at potentially submitting early, which it's a rolling application, so we could get an earlier response. But when I spoke to Commerce, they said upon receival of application, anticipate a 2 to 3 week turnaround time. So regardless, end of November when we would hear back.
Okay, so thinking in terms of timeline in our process here, you know, I heard Carolina, I don't know if she's still on, I don't think so, say that it would be a good idea for us to consider a set aside to make sure that funding is indeed available to cover the regional share there. So I'm thinking, looking at our December RHC meeting, we'll know what has come out of the Commerce process. And we can have that conversation then. Rich, I heard you say that if it doesn't work out with Commerce, you'll have to go to the Olympia City Council to figure out what's next. But I think that conversation should actually come to the RHC because this is a regional facility here. And we are, of course, very willing to like support it with the resources that we have. But I think that if Commerce ends up not being an option, then we should all be a part of figuring out how to fill that gap. But it sounds like bringing this back to the December meeting, knowing what we'll know from Commerce, then we can have the conversation around a potential set aside. How does that sound?
I agree with your thinking, Danny. And during the executive team meeting, we kind of floated the idea of having maybe a half day or so retreat to address Quinn Street, but also to address sustainability for each of the projects that we're taking on. So I think is something we're going to have to look at. I'm encouraged that the legislature seems to be realizing the need that the state is going to have to kick in some on helping us operate the facilities as they come on. But we need to do some strategizing and thinking about that. So if everybody's, can I maybe see a thumbs up of voting members, whether you're willing to entertain like a half-day retreat to dig in on this?
A half-day retreat, like about when? Like before the end of the year?
Yeah, it kind of would have to be, I think.
Yeah, I'm willing, but I would need to get it on my schedule as soon as possible.
We all would. Yeah, I appreciate. Michael, how do you feel?
Yeah, I guess I don't really have a firm sense of our goal coming out of what our goal would be for that retreat. Like, is it if we're just hashing out like what our sort of regional obligations is for various projects that we've taken on, that sort of, I don't know, kind of strikes me as something that the technical team could work on and come up with a plan for, unless there are more delicate issues that need to be ironed out.
I think there are.
I'd say like I'm open to it, but it doesn't strike me as something as like, oh, we definitely need to do a full retreat with the facilitator and so on and so forth.
No, not with the facilitator. I just think we need more than one of these regular meetings to really get to the meat of this and do some planning and strategizing. And I don't know, I mean, let me call on some of our tech team like Ryan or Tom, hear from you all on what you think the best approach might be.
Yeah, I think unknown. So I think it's appropriate for the tech team to dive in and do some preliminary work. But then I think there are probably some larger conversations that do need to happen. And to be honest, I think the tech team needs to do some of that work first, and then kind of really determine what we need to bring to the full RHC and kind of what are the key questions or the sticking points or the outstanding issues that require additional conversation. So I think there is some initial work for the tech team to do. I think there is and bringing that to the larger body is appropriate. December, to be honest, is going to be pretty quick turnaround, but we can try to make that happen. But I would agree that there is some tech team work first, and then to prepare for a larger conversation of this group.
So I was thinking before the end of the year, simply to be ready for the legislative session, but what's your feel for timing?
I don't know. I looked to some of the other tech team members. We're working on a housing action plan crosswalk right now, so that's what we've been prioritizing. We're also working we are working on the right-of-way NOFA application, and there's some other funding applications that other jurisdictions are working on. So, and with the holidays, and so, and I know we're meeting early December, the RHC, rather than at the end of the month in November, December, due to the holidays. So I leave that a little bit open-ended. Sorry, that's not a direct answer.
That's okay. I mean, we're just I'm afraid we're kind of spitballing on this. Brad, I was going to just call on you. So
yeah, just a moment. Want to make sure I'm on. Just to also echo, we are also, I know Olympia staff and county staff are heavily involved in preparing the initial framework for a response for a HUD grant, which is a substantial amount of money for this year. So I'm looking at just what we've been allocated on the tech team side just for this year is pretty substantial. So unless there's other things that could be pulled off or delayed, I'm not sure if we can necessarily be ready or be prepared in an adequate fashion for something in December.
Okay, thank you. Michael? And
yes, I mean, even if it were possible to pull together like a retreat by the end of September, if the goal is to have that for the legislative session, kind of behind the 8 ball at that point anyway. Like if the goal is to get the legislature to support a specific project beyond increasing a certain bucket of funds that you could apply for, like those conversations should be happening like right now.
Right.
Like December is too late for that really anyway.
Okay. Anybody else want to chime in on this one?
Yeah, I'd like to,
Anna.
so we had a retreat last year. I think that every other year is good timing for a retreat. So I think we could look a little forward to, you know, I don't even remember when that happened last year, but like, what about was the 2-year mark when we did our retreat? And think about several topics that we could bring up, you know, and just things that we need to all coalesce around and have some intentional time. It doesn't have to be about just this one item in terms of long-term sustainability of our facilities that we have right now. But that's where my thinking's at, is like, you know, if what is the cadence that we want to be doing retreats as a group? And if it's every other year, then sometime next year would be appropriate for that. And then thinking more broadly in terms of what else we would want to be talking about.
Okay.
I'll just chime in and echo what Tom said at the beginning, which is, you know, the tech team's really involved right now in developing the crosswalk, which identifies kind of our priorities between jurisdictions and those that overlap. And just to kind of give you a brief synopsis of what we're finding is there's kind of 3 different buckets of we'll say topics that should hit the RHC. One is funding. One is legislative amendments, and then another is outreach and education. And so I guess what I'm hearing is it may be not just a funding discussion, but it may be a priorities discussion that then starts to kind of develop what the funding strategy could look like. So Chair Coxwell, I understand, you know, the need to try to meet. I think maybe it's just a little too early, and I think we need to do some more work on the tech team side and bring some of that stuff forward to you, that then we can start kind of figuring out what the picture looks like for the RHC's work plan in 24 and move forward that way.
All righty. Well, this may come up a little bit further down the agenda when we talk about legislative agenda, but I hear what you're saying, and yeah, I definitely want to let the tech team run with it. Robin, you had your hand raised.
Yes, but I'll hold my comments until we get to that agenda item about the legislative agenda.
Okay. All right. So I think we are where we are on this, and we're ready to move on. Am I hearing that? Rich, did you get done what you wanted to get done there? And Darian?
Yes, thank you. Just appreciate very much the support from the RHC on the city's request. Thank you.
So did we land on we're circling back on that next month because we'll have heard from Commerce by then? Is that where we landed on this one?
December is, I think, when we'll know for, we may know earlier, but it sounds like December is the more likely timeline.
Okay.
Thanks. Right. Okay. Well, let's move on to Caven and the recommendation for allocating the CHG inflationary funds. Are you ready, Caven? Caven, are you there?
Yes. Sorry, I had a couple of technical difficulties.
I understand. Okay.
So I guess I'll get started with the CHG inflationary conversation. There was a request made to approve recommendations to distribute $749,709 of consolidated homeless grant funds to agencies with within our homeless crisis response system. That offer services and programs based on the total number of FTEs each agency has that provide frontline or direct services to homeless clients. Of those frontline workers, we're looking at folks who make less than $28 per hour or salaried equivalent. As a little bit of background on that, in May of 2023, the Housing Assistance Unit announced 4 funding buckets intended to fill gaps left by a reduction in document recording fees revenue and the sunsetting COVID-19 specific funds, including emergency solutions grants, ESG CV, and shelter programs grant. The HAAU identified 4 sources to ensure that the homeless crisis response system across the state would be able to maintain current operating levels and ensure that there was no interruption of services. As a quote from the memo, the legislation appropriated $45.6 million for Commerce to increase existing guaranteed contracts, providing rental or housing subsidy and services to eligible tenants in housing and homeless grants. The department must distribute funding in a manner that will prioritize maintaining current levels of homeless subsidies and services and stabilizing the homeless service provider workforce. What's important is bolded here. Commerce expects the grantee to prioritize salary increases or retention stipends for their homeless service provider workforce, and to extend to an extent possibly offset other inflation costs. The Homeless Services Advisory Board has recommended that agencies within our homeless crisis response system that provide homeless services respond to a survey that's been developed by OHHP staff to determine how many frontline staff they have that make equal to or less than $28 an hour. We've identified other eligible activities that could be funded as funds are for vacant staff positions that would meet the given definition of frontline or direct service workers. And again, when we say FTEs, we're also including part-time employees. As we know, there are many within our system, so that's rolling two part-time workers up into one full-time employee. For the purposes of the services, we would ask folks to enumerate the number of full-time frontline direct service employees based on a 40-hour work week. Annually, the Homeless Services Advisory Board would review how these funds were distributed, and reporting to the Homeless Services Advisory Board would be facilitated by staff liaisons through semi-annual reports. Once survey responses have been provided by homeless service providers, OHHP staff will develop an allocation chart for the CHG inflationary fund distribution. These allocation recommendations will be presented to the Homeless Services Advisory Board in October, and during the October meeting. The Homeless Services Advisory Board will then make recommendations to the RHC in regards to these funds. So the proposed solution that we have here is to approve the recommendation that homeless service agencies within our homeless crisis response system that provide homeless services respond to a survey developed by OHHP staff to determine how many frontline workers they have making less than $28 an hour in order to distribute the $749,709 of CHG inflationary funds.
All right. Anybody want to offer a motion on that, and then so we can discuss? Danny?
I'd like to get clear on what is being asked of us. Are we being asked to make a recommendation to homeless services agencies that they fill out a survey to support this process? Because I don't know that we have authority to tell them what to do. So I just want to make sure that I'm reading this correctly.
It's,
I'm hearing they-
oh,
the
sorry.
da- I'm hearing they need the data to begin to make the decision. Can you speak to that, Kevin? Okay, who?
I can speak to that.
All right, Keely.
The request is to approve the recommendation of the process. So the process is sending out the survey to the providers filling it out, us compiling all of that information, giving it back to the Homeless Services Advisory Board. So it's just approving this process that the Homeless Services Advisory Board is recommending.
Got it. Okay. Just reading through the recommendation. It just read a little funny to me. That's all.
Confusing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in that case, I'd be happy to make a motion that we approve this process as presented.
Right. I'll second it. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of,
Brian's got his hand up.
oh, Brian, go ahead.
Yes, I understand it's just the process, listening to it and such. Are we going to, at some point, discuss that $28 an hour, adding to it to bring it up to, and I think, what was it that they're trying to bring it up to? Or are we just looking at the process of trying to figure out who the employees are that are helping and what their hourly rates are?
Yeah, so I can answer that. It's the $28 an hour is based on the out of reach report that comes out every year through the National Low Income Housing Coalition, which identifies the average salary an individual or household needs to make in order to afford a per hour, in order to afford a moderate 2-bedroom house apartment or home. And so in Thurston County, it is 28. We're not asking for agencies to ensure that everyone is making up to $28. That would be fabulous, but rather just creating some parameters around who would be like what person is eligible, like what number of people are eligible.
Does that answer your question, Brian? Well, let's move on. Alrighty. Anything else before we vote? So this will be a motion to approve the process for the inflationary funds. So, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, carries unanimously. Thank you. And now we have Elisa with giving us a short report on the draft communications plan for the Regional Housing Council. Are you ready, Elisa?
I am.
Awesome.
So I'm Elisa Sparkman, I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the communications specialist to the RHC and a staff member at Thurston County Office of Housing and Homeless Prevention. So I put together a draft communications plan, and I am going to share it with you. It was in the agenda packet, so I hope that all of you had a chance to review it before today, because I'm not gonna, go through every word, because it's got a lot going on. So this is for next year, and some of the stuff where I've already started working on is just kind of setting a timeline for an annual communication plan. So we have some background on the RHC, and basically the RHC is a relatively new body or council. So officially are formalized in early 2021. So this, and then my position as the communication specialist is new as of the spring of this year. So this communication plan is very basic in terms of the purpose is to really create a foundation of consistent, reliable communication from the RHC to stakeholders. And so this plan is kind of the starting point for communication practices for this council, and it's meant to be expanded upon over the following years. So the goal is to really further establish the RHC as kind of the hub of information, the community source of information, and leadership around affordable housing and homeless response. So we move on to the responsibilities and projects. So the first table is basically the ongoing communication responsibilities. So these are kind of the regular tasks that the communication specialist, which is me right now, does to kind of keep things up to date and keep things kind of, these are like the base stuff that I do. So keeping the website up to date, providing communication updates at the meetings, putting together the news releases, announcements, other informational materials as needed, social media, and then responding to media requests. So that's kind of the base of what I've been doing now. And then looking forward, and the first project is to establish branding of the RHC, which we already have the logo, and I've already done, this is kind of a very basic task. So having branded templates to work from. So this is basically due at the beginning of the year because it's almost pretty much done. I have 3 templates at least now, so I'll probably create some more. And then the kind of big project of the next year is to develop and implement an email newsletter for the community. And this is has a lot of steps. And at the beginning of next year, I'll be looking for a lot of input from the RHC and the tech team to kind of see how we want to do this, because there are a lot of options. So basically outlining the newsletter's objectives and what kind of schedule we want to put it on, designing it, and who's going to be contributing, that kind of stuff. So a lot of that needs to be decided early on in the year. And we have a really, I think, we've aimed really high with the goal date of having the first issue out by the end of the first quarter of 2024. So that would mean a lot of like decisions made pretty quickly at the beginning of the year, so we can get that first issue out starting in March next year. All right, and then the next project is kind of something that Councilmember Madrone brought up at the last meeting, I think, around assessing the need for RHC social media accounts rather than using the social media through the jurisdiction accounts. This is, we have kind of a process to create RHC branded materials and share them from the jurisdictions that are part of the RHC. And after we've been doing this for a while consistently, it's a good time to assess, is this something we still want to keep doing, or do we want to create some RHC specific accounts? So the middle of the year, summer, to kind of have that kind of, I'm hoping to have a recommendation on that in the middle of the year in the summer for RHC. And then also, you know, say we decide not to move forward with this, this can continue to be an annual review, or even, you know, every 6 months, something that we come back to and say, is now the right time? So it can likely stay on the communication plan. There's the next project is expanding the RHC website. The tech team has, in working on these work plans and housing action plan, crosswalks and stuff, we see then that there can be different kinds of shared resource pages among the jurisdictions, and that the RHC could be a good place for that. So that will be kind of dependent on the RHC's tech team's work plan. And and I think that plays into that overall goal of having the RHC as kind of that hub of information for affordable housing and homeless response. And so one example is having a resource page for developers that kind of outlines incentives that are offered in the different jurisdictions of Thurston County, kind of all in one place. So that's just an example of one of the resource pages that the tech team has talked about. And then one thing that I'd like to have by the end of the year next year is a manual for communications for the RHC, so that if someone were to take over my position, they'd be able to kind of jump in and have everything documented on what the duties are, and so that all this work is able to be consistent if it changes hands, and that people can expect this good communications, consistent communications, even throughout changes, or if for some reason I take a leave of absence or something, I don't know. I'm not planning on it, but just to have good backups and everything's there. And then, of course, getting ready to do the next year's communications plan. So hoping to, present the draft around October. We're doing it September this year, but kind of the same model of presenting the draft for the 2025 work plan in September or October, and have it finalized by December. So, and we'll kind of be thinking about, right now there's some things on here that we've already started talking about, and that kind of, it doesn't always work on this calendar year. So when it comes to projects and timelines and that kind of stuff for communication, and things come up and things change. So this is all flexible if needed. And then we have some implementation information here, and that the person responsible for leading the implementation of this communication plan is the communication specialist. So that's me for now. And the tech team offers support in drafting base content and reviewing and editing content and consulting with the communication specialist. And then we have kind of a review process to make sure that everything gets reviewed before it goes public. And we have a list of stakeholders that I invite members to add on to if we've left anything out, and our resources and support of the tech team members that are kind of the main leads on this. So that's it.
Thanks, Aletha. That's great. Anybody have questions? Danny.
Yeah, first off, thank you. That's really cool. I love seeing a nice, concise, clear plan. So good job. And you made a couple of statements of, that's me for now, and like the destiny. I do hope you are planning on sticking around.
I did not mean to sound ominous about that at all. I just don't want to be presumptuous, like it's me forever.
I know.
I don't have any plans of leaving. I'm very happy in this job. I just started.
Yeah. Well, that being said, I do have two questions. You had a bullet in there around recruiting an audience, recruiting readers of a newsletter. And I'm curious, if you have strategies that you are thinking of for that. Just from me thinking about emails that I get from constituents, if our staff could be like, hey, if you're interested, you could sign up for the RHC newsletter. So are you thinking about like that kind of engagement with the other jurisdictions, and what other strategies?
Yeah, I think what makes this project itself special is that we have this RHC coordination and collaboration with the jurisdiction. So we have this opportunity to provide a newsletter that's really holistic when it comes to what's going on in affordable housing and homeless response, what everybody's doing, and we can talk about what questions different jurisdictions are getting regularly and get ideas for what to put in the newsletter based on everybody, kind of what's going on everywhere in the county. And as for recruitment, we already have we have a housing newsletter that was created around the time of COVID rent assistance, kind of early on, that has several hundred. I haven't checked it. I don't quite remember the number. So I think we will offer it to all of those people who signed up for that newsletter about rent assistance to sign up for this new one, which I think would be a lot of community members. And then using social media, partnering with the jurisdictions, looking at who's going out in the community. And so we can have, QR codes to make it easy to sign up, and really just spread the word as much as we can, and make sure that staff everywhere knows about it, so that, and one of the comments that we get sometimes from staff that are not in housing is, people ask about it all the time and we don't really know what to say. And I'm sure all of the jurisdictions get that. So this could be a really good opportunity for staff to say, I actually work in plant, like, for us, it's like, oh, I do COVID vaccine work. So, but I don't have that information, but there's this great newsletter that shares what's going on. And that is an easy response to get, to show people that we have this information, we're sharing it, and we want to share it with the public. And that kind of community engagement helps everybody feel like they're a part of these solutions. And I think it's kind of I'm really excited about the project.
Great. That all sounds great. And I'm sure there'll be new ideas that come up as you're out there recruiting people to pay attention to the work that we do. My other question is, you had something in there around the process for approving materials with final approval by the RHC chair or vice chair. And I'm curious, what's the threshold of a communications document that would require some level of approval? Because I imagine if you make an image for social media that gets sent to the jurisdictions to post online, you're probably not asking the RHC chair to sign off on something like that. So what types of things are you seeking approval from the RHC chair or vice chair?
So anything that's a formal release from the RHC. So usually social media stuff is hand in hand with an announcement or a news release. Or something that we kind of say, hey, we ask for approval to do. Like if I have an idea for something for social media, I would, get approval to do it for the most part, if it's coming out of nowhere. But usually it's prompted by a news release or an announcement, and those formal materials are what get reviewed. So, for example, we have, besides those, the news releases that you're familiar with, there's the funding announcements, and then we put together the informational document about the Rights of Way initiative. And so that's kind of different than the announcements. It's an informational document. So we have the content expert, and I work together in creating it. I usually have another set of eyes before it goes to the chair or vice chair, whoever's available. Because sometimes we need quick turnover. So, yeah, I think I haven't really had anything that I thought, oh, does this really need their review or approval? So once the main piece, sorry, I'm rambling. Once the main material is reviewed, I kind of take it as the smaller pieces that go with it are also approved, because I'm not creating something new. The content is already approved.
That all makes sense.
Yeah.
And I just ask out of curiosity. I think one thing too, and maybe this is written somewhere in your plan or it'll be part of the manual that you create for the job, is, once something has been approved by the chair, it also gets distributed to the RHC members. And the reason I say that is sometimes things, hit the community, and then we start getting questions, and you know, it's helpful to be able to read something up front. So if somebody asks us questions, we know exactly what they're talking about. So if that's not included in the plan, or that's what you've been doing. So
there's a distribution process.
Okay, all right. So that isn't okay. Great, perfect.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Not seeing any raised hands here. So thanks, Elisa. We'll look forward to seeing this go.
Yeah, so this is basically a thumbs up with everybody, and go forward and get to work. It's still for next year. So if you think of something in the next couple months, or if you look back at it and see, oh, we need to add a few more stakeholders, please let me know.
I can't see everybody, but am I hearing thumbs up from the voting members?
Looks like it.
Looks like it. Okay, great.
you.
Thank you so much. The next up is the right-of-way notice of funds availability with Keely and Darien.
Yes. So I'll lead us off really quickly. We on September 8th received a notice from Ted Kelleher from the Department of Commerce that there was indeed a NOFA that was released to right-of-way communities. The NOFA has been retitled the Encampment Relocation Program for state fiscal year 24 and 25. The funds that were distributed to the 5 communities were formulaic, based on population size and the work that we've done. The funds are to prioritize continuing the work of getting people out of the encampments and into permanent housing, preferably. And they're really looking for innovative strategies that lead specifically to permanent housing. Within this NOFA, there is a requirement from the state that all people who are removed from encampments are offered actual placements into permanent housing within 6 months. We've already discussed that is nearly impossible for every community in Washington state. However, what we are thinking of, the solutions we are considering putting in our application, which we've already run past Ted Kelleher and got an enthusiastic thumbs up, do aid and abet that aim to have permanent solutions for folks leaving the right of way to be moved into permanent housing either immediately or incrementally. Another element of this NOFA is that 20% of the funds can be used to support other public property. So, for instance, Nickerson Camp, which is right across the street from the Wheeler Camp that was just cleared, it would be considered one, perhaps Percival Creek. I know that the camps that are still on the list for being moved and are currently being relocated are the city center, Nickerson Camp, and then the property out on state property in Lacey, the Desmond Drive property, and some camps potentially along Percival Creek. We know that with Slater Kenny, at least 40 to 50 people that were living there when the camp was swept did not make it into housing and currently are occupying other camps as they can find. So we want to find solutions for those individuals as well. So at this point, as Darian said, it is a rolling application, finally due on October 25th. And we have 3 projects that we are highlighting in our application. One is the potential purchase of a hotel or motel that would be quickly rehabilitate, or like there'd be a quick rehab. There'd be about 27, 28 units. We're also discussing the possibility of a local agency that would already be able to operate it. So without formal approval from on either side of that project, we have to keep it pretty high level, but it's an exciting possibility to within, I don't know, 8 months or so, create some permanent housing beds. The other project is as Darian mentioned, is the 30 set-aside beds in Quinn Street Village for the next 2 years, and that leads right up to potentially the time that Quinn Street Village is within that time frame hopefully, and I'll let Darian speak to that if that's true, because I'm kind of making it up from my memory, starting to turn into more permanent housing. And then our final one, and I'll let Darian fill in all the gaps. The project that has received funding and has just applied for housing tax credits in downtown Olympia, the 228 Franklin, I believe is the address, through TWG, or Together We Grow, to shore up their funding. They have a $5 million funding gap due to project-based vouchers being all spoken for the next several years and needing that gap to be filled. So we are asking for that $5 million gap to be filled. Currently, Thurston County has been allocated $3.9 million to apply for. However, the state has indicated that if a community has an excellent project that is in alignment with the NOFA, and other communities either have proposals that don't meet the minimum eligibility criteria and or they refuse to participate in the NOFA, then those funds will be reallocated towards communities that can. So we have great confidence that even though we're asking well above the 3.9 that has been allocated on paper to Thurston, that we'll be able to secure more with our plans. Darian?
Yeah. Again, we're looking to propose the more of a phased approach. So immediate shelter beds at Quinn Street, a little longer term support at the motel, and then being able to fill in some of the gap funding for the TWG project. Also, the right-of-way work helped close the gap for the Unity Commons Phase 2 in the last right-of-way project. And so this is just kind of another element of that, showing immediate beds, a little longer term beds, and then permanent financing for the permanent supportive housing. So we're looking to submit the first application as soon as we can for Quinn Street and for the hotel purchase. And then with the hope that Commerce would respond and say, this is in alignment to what we're looking for. Here's the allocation. Yes, move forward. And then those additional dollars, which just kind of go into the larger pool. And if counties don't have permanent projects or don't align with the NOFA, then that gap funding would be allocated to the project. So that is our plan at this time.
Okay. I noticed both of you say permanent housing. Is this permanent supportive housing? Or
for which?
Well, you've mentioned it in both. Keely mentioned it in both instances. So
for the motel purchase, it's, just like the Days Inn, they don't have kitchens, it's not like an apartment. So it would be sort of a temporary, permanent housing for people. It's not a shelter. People aren't going to be exited or something. It's a permanent place. But like the whole PSH model, it would need to be renovated and brought up to the permanent supportive housing model as far as the motel. And then for the TWG project, a portion of those are dedicated permanent supportive housing and a portion are low income housing. So maybe that's why we're saying permanent housing, because it's not like a night by night. But it's not our traditional sense of permanent supportive housing for really either of the projects. It's a bit of a hybrid for both.
Gotcha. Thank you. Anybody have questions for Keely or Darian?
I have a question.
Yes.
Yes. And this may be off topic, but listen and kind of reflecting on what we've been working on in reference to housing. Some of the learning that I've been doing by listening to discussions, doing research, housing is wonderful, but we're also, I guess I'm missing something that helps those that need the housing, and that's the services, such as those who need rehabilitative services for addictions, those that need retraining services, those that need assistance. Are we looking at doing that as well, or are we depending upon other organizations that once we develop a housing concept for that, the services then come in? And I just need some clarity on that. I apologize if this has been answered in the past before.
No problem. I can take a stab at that, Darian. And so absolutely services are needed. However, in this particular NOFA, that is not what they're asking for outside of the identified projects of whether it be temporary or permanent housing. So there is a requirement within the NOFA that each of the projects, whether they be temporary, such as Quinn Street Village, or permanent, or SRO kind of project, absolutely we have to address how behavioral health is going to be engaged. What does the staffing model look like, and how are our staff supporting those residents within that project? So that's specific to this NOFA. Other funding sources, like with our annual consolidated RFP, that's where a lot of the services are funded through. So yes, there's a huge need, and it will be addressed in this NOFA specific to these projects. Otherwise, the services are funded through our annual or biannual process.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
No problem.
All righty. Any more questions about this? Okay, let's move on then to our next item, which is the PRO housing item. And that's Darian.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see my screen okay? Okay. So this, the goal of us sharing about this funding opportunity is to really just lay out what we're looking to do and then to advertise public comment. And so we're here today really as just information to share the application that we'll be submitting, and then to allow you all to ask questions, and to share when we will be holding our public hearing and public comment period for more just thorough public outreach. So Pathways to Removing Obstacles to Housing, or PRO Housing, is a HUD grant that the city is in the process of submitting. It's fashioned after CDBG, so very similar regulations, public service requirements, national objective, etc. The awards are between $1 and $10 million, and it's over a five-year span on when you could spend down the $5 million. Applications are due October 30th, but because it's a federal grant, we have to work backwards and have it done a little bit earlier than that. So that's why we're here with you all today. So what the goal of the grant is to identify a barrier in your housing system and then lay out how you plan to address that barrier. And you must show what your region or what your community is doing in terms of housing and homeless response already. So there's a large amount of points from the get that says, what is your community doing already? What are your priorities? And show us the progress you've made. And through that process, you should have been able to see barriers. And then that you've seen barriers, what is your plan to address those barriers? And so we've decided that homeownership is the barrier that we are seeing throughout all of our processes, through the assessment of fair housing, consolidated plan work, through our housing action plan, that the access to affordable home ownership is really challenging. And so that's the barrier we want to address. And then here are the ways that we feel that we will have success around home ownership, especially in our region where typical home is between $400,000 and $500,000. Coming up with a down payment is really challenging for that amount of money. So here are ways that we feel that we can address those barriers. So four elements of our proposal. First is to launch a down payment assistance program. That has been highlighted in all of our housing action plans, that we desperately need a down payment assistance program. Increase access to home buyer counseling services. For many first-time home buyer loans, you have to go through home buyer counseling. And so we really want to work with buy and for organizations to be able to provide that and address homeownership barriers for marginalized communities. provide capacity building for local homeownership organizations, and be able to have more organizations that are supporting people in our community to have access to home ownership. And we're looking at that specifically through the Land Trust. Right now, it's really a volunteer-led organization. And so we're excited for grants that really open possibilities up for administrative support. We don't see those often, where we can say we need funds for an executive director. It's usually project-based funds, and you can take admin off the top of that. But this is allowing us to really dedicate funds to the Land Trust so they can build capacity and build their portfolio. We see the Land Trust model throughout the nation be incredibly successful. And so we want to lean on that and allow the model to be successful in Thurston County and build projects within our Land Trust. And then capital dollars. It's not just the funds for homeownership that are struggling, but also just entry first-time smaller homes for people with townhomes or condos, or more of cottage style homes, like first-time homes for people. We just don't have a large stock in our community. So being able to have capital dollars to entice developers to build those opportunities for people. So more specifics about the down payment assistance program. I'm not going to go into all of those, but this is just to highlight that we're proposing to partner with WSFIC, the Washington State Housing Finance Commission. They have a down payment assistance program that's already set up, and we've worked with them to say, this is something that we want to do. Would you like to work with us in this? And they're very excited to do that. And so we would have the funding come through us, but WSFIC would be processing the applications and do all of the administrative work for the down payment assistance. And with that, they can match up to $15,000. And so our target for home ownership, for AMI for home ownership, will be between that 60 and 80% AMI. And that's hoping to match our $65,000 in DPA and then $15,000 through WSFIC. And applicants would be able to couple that and then purchase a home. And with that, the home buyer counseling assistance would be there. And then, of course, partnering with local homeownership organizations like Habitat and the Land Trust to see which projects in their portfolio could be then used for down payment assistance through the home buyer counseling process, and maybe even a capital purchase. So you see what we're trying to get. We're seeing the obstacles: funding, counseling, capital, and administrative support for our local nonprofits. So for home buyer counseling, this is, again, for over 5 years. And so we're asking for $1 million to be able to diversify which organizations in Thurston County can provide home buyer counseling services. Traditionally, home buyer counseling goes through credit unions or banks, and those can be intimidating or not really culturally connected to folks that we're hoping to serve. And so we really want to try to invest in buy-in for organizations that are doing the work, have trust with the community members that they work with, and are able to provide their services at the location that they serve. I met with the executive director of Roof yesterday in Rochester, saying, would you be able to, or open to someone who has expertise in home buyer counseling to work with the folks you're already serving and host a course at your facility. And so they're excited to see this application come through and would be a partner in the work with us. As I mentioned, we're looking to add capacity building for the Land Trust. Looking to do this work from a volunteer approach is really challenging, I could only imagine. So we want them to be robust and have a strategic plan and be able to have sustainable funding so they can have administrative staff and really build their portfolio. So that's something that we've been working with them on, and that is also built in this grant. And capital funding. We're seeing really great success with this, with the Habitat for Humanity's Boulevard project, with Franz Anderson, with the Franklin Olympia project, with Unity Commons. When the city or public government owns the land, we're able to be creative and look for projects that the community needs. And so if we have capital funding, we can include that into this land banking process that we have. If an opportunity comes up, we can use capital funding to purchase this land, potentially RFP it, and only ask for home ownership construction on the site. So again, the four-pronged approach with down payment assistance, counseling, capital funding, and administrative support for the Land Trust. Oh, and then there's the 10% administrative dollars that go on to the project. So we're asking for 10 million. You can ask between 1 and 10. So we're gonna ask for 10 million. And then there's the 10% administrative support that would take a lot of underwriting. All of the project will need environmental reviews. Anyone who's dabbled in CDBG knows the administrative work that it requires to administer the grant. So this would be the administrative support that it would take to do the work of the pro housing allocation. Application process. So we are getting letters of support. We are writing this massive document. Public comment is from October 12th to the 26th. There's a 15-day public comment period. So we are working to have this done by the 12th. The public hearing is at the City of Olympia on the 24th, and the application is due on the 30th. So anyone listening, if you're looking to review the grant, want to hear the proposal more in depth, here are the dates where you have the opportunity to do that. Okay.
Questions for Darian? Brian, is that a new hand raise?
I apologize. Something must have hit my phone.
That's okay. No worries. Well, I'm not seeing any hands raised, Darian, so you obviously did a good job of explaining all of it, and it's very ambitious, but very exciting as well. So thank you. And stay tuned, right? Okay, good. All right, moving on. Tom is going to lead us in a little discussion about legislative agenda, and well, take it away, Tom, and I'll chime in if need be.
Great, thank you. So we put this on the item because we know the RHC has discussed this over the last couple of months of, the RHC wanting to have a legislative agenda, but how to do that. And so wanted to continue that discussion today. When the executive team met, Commissioner Mejia had the idea of the RHC coming up with one priority that would be the RHC that each jurisdiction would add to their legislative priorities that they could take forward for this year, knowing that time is tight. And so wanted to kind of throw out the idea of the RHC coming up with one priority that all the jurisdictions could then add to their own legislative agendas. And then over the next year, really work to kind of maybe develop a more robust process or approach for the RHC and what that could look like for the RHC to kind of move forward its own legislative agenda. So the idea that Commissioner Mejia was thinking around, or the proposed priority that she had was around really maintaining funding for a lot of these projects that we've been talking about. And we talked also about incorporating the need for rental assistance funding as well. As many of you know, or all of you know, the COVID-related rental assistance funding of $55 million that we spent over the last 3 years has gone away, but we continue to see a need for rental assistance. But so that was her suggestion, but really we wanted to give this group an opportunity to kind of continue the discussion around legislative agenda, how to move forward this year, what potential priority would be, and whether it would be appropriate for jurisdictions to add an RHC recommended priority to their own legislative agendas. Does that, Chair Cox, is that a good summary of what we talked about on Friday, and anything you'd add?
I guess the only thing I would add is that, we're bringing this up in recognition that we are really not an independent agency yet, although we're kind of heading in that direction. And we really don't have staff time and resources or a designated person to go and lobby for this, but the cities do. So if we could come up with a common, well, I mean, we gave you two, kind of high level suggestions. The question to you all is, are you willing to incorporate this into your own city's legislative agenda? And if so, we need to, time's getting pretty tight on that, because I know we'll start having meetings with our legislators within the next month or two. So I'd love to hear from folks. Danny?
Yeah, I can't speak on behalf of the council as to, what we will include in our legislative agenda, because it's a vote of the council. That being said, if there's something that comes out of this group that's where we would like to see all the jurisdictions include something because it's important for all of us, I'd be willing to champion that, and I can be very persuasive. We've already started talking about our legislative agenda, so you're correct that time is of the essence here.
Thank you. You're still on mute, Chair Cox, if you were.
I'm so sorry. Robin and then Brian.
Thank you. I would just mention that the county and the cities, including Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, and Yelm, as well as the port and the EDC, and I think South Puget Sound Community College, have a shared legislative partnership. And perhaps all of the cities and the county can make this a priority on the shared partnerships legislative agenda. And that meeting, that first meeting of that group is coming up, I think, October 18th.
All righty. Thank you for contributing that. And then Brian, you had your hand raised.
Yes, I can't, just as others have said, I can't speak for my council, can't speak for the leadership in my community, but I can speak. I think because we're regional, and I think something that maybe we should advocate for within Thurston County, in particular, since there's so much, excuse me, there's so much funding that has been collected, revenue from a variety of resources that have been more than what they were expecting. We should be looking at doing something not just with housing related, but maybe look at trying to get it so we have facilities that help with the rehabilitation, because we don't have any treatment facilities. We don't have access to that. And that is one of the big barriers that a lot of unhoused have. And I'm not saying that all unhoused are addicts. I'm just saying that that's one of the big barriers, but we don't have any beds. I mean, think about it. Earlier this year, Pierce County only had 3 beds for the whole county. Maybe we can work on something that advocates to help out, because that in conjunction with the housing, I think we could do a lot more good and all. That's just my thought.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, Robin's up and down. Anybody else want to comment on this? All right. So, Robin, I know this is your first meeting, but would you be willing to kind of spearhead this if we can come up with a, if the group can give a thumbs up to the 2 items or a different item to carry forward?
Yeah. Yes, I would absolutely be happy to bring it up at the shared legislative partnership meeting. I'm trying to see who else. Jay Burney, Rick Walk, and Lisa Parks are all part of that meeting. So
okay, good. Well, I'd like to hear from voting members, and that doesn't exclude you today, Robin. How you all feel about this, whether this is the best, whether we do need to weigh in as a group, and if so, if this is the right path, and whether we can agree on 1 or 2 high level things that we would make a request for. Mike, I see your wheels turning there. Okay, Gary.
Oh, thank you. Robin, I have a question. I don't know if City of Yalma's been participating in the shared partnership. And if not, should I be contacting our city administrator?
So I'm trying to figure out, I do believe someone from the city of Yelm is on this list. Hang on. Todd Stansel?
Yes, that's the correct person. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Great.
All right. So
Carolyn, the question to us is, do we want to collectively decide on one or two priorities that we would like to advance to our respective jurisdictions for inclusion in our city or county legislative agendas?
well, yeah, I mean, do we want to have a one or two item agenda at all? And two, if so, the process that we just talked about that Robin was suggesting, since we don't have staff bandwidth to do the lobbying.
I think
Oh, go ahead, Michael.
I was just gonna say, I think for me, it's less of choosing whether you want to have, like, I don't think that having the agenda should dictate the project. I think if there's like a mutual regional project that we think warrants that level of support and advocacy, then that totally makes sense to me. It's a little confusing to me to just choose to have a legislative agenda and then just put a project on there, because we don't, like, the worst thing in the world is you request money to do something and you get it and then you don't use it, because then when you try to request it again in the future, then it's immensely more challenging because you've sort of burned a bridge a little bit. Like, if there's a project in the wings that we think is like, this needs to be the thing, this makes a lot of sense for this to be the priority, then I think that that should drive the conversation of if there should be a regional effort or agenda on it, rather than, yeah, we should do a legislative agenda and then we just come up with something to put on it. But that might already be the case. There might be something waiting that it does make sense to do that for. I just don't know what that is.
Okay. Robin, is that a new hand up?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay.
So I would say, I don't think that Commissioner Mejia's thought was about advocating for a specific project, as in funding for one thing. Rather, we know that the supportive funding for M&O at Franz Anderson is time limited from the state. We know that the emergency housing and rental assistance money is going to come to an end along with ARPA. We know that things are not necessarily, the situation about the need for affordable housing and rental assistance is not going away. So I believe that Commissioner Mejia is advocating to go to the state and request continued funding. And not necessarily around a specific project, but just the funding be continued into the future.
And that would be funding to sustain what we have and what's coming online, and of course with the rental assistance program.
Absolutely. And I think that the earlier conversation about the need for this group to have a clear list of, here are the projects that we're committing to. Franz Anderson needs support going into the future. Quint Street, and let's see, I'm sorry, I can't remember. It's not Maple Lane. Maple Park, Maple, thank you, Maple Court in Lacey. All of these projects are going to need continued M&O funding in the future, and the services that some of you have mentioned. We want to ensure that the legislature continues to support this at the higher level, and it doesn't just all end at the end of 24 or 25.
Thanks, Robin. Thought somebody else had a hand raised, but I don't see it now. Okay, well, let me just quickly poll the group. I mean, do you want to pursue an agenda like what Robin just described this year and do it through the coordinated group? Or should we each as our own entity lobby for funds for this purpose?
I guess I'm a little still unclear on the ask. Is the ask that we continue to talk about this at the next meeting and develop a clear agenda that we then pass on to that regional group and bring to our own jurisdictions?
Well, I guess the first question is, should we do it at all? And then B, what is the process for doing it? Whether we do it through the large group, try to get it on their agenda, or whether we try to agree on an item that each of us takes to our respective jurisdictions and tries to put on our agendas. But it needs to be something that we can agree on that, let's say we need, $15 million, to sustain operations and fund rental assistance programs. I mean, for example, that's just as an example. Does that make sense?
It does. So I think the first question is it worth our time to have that conversation at the next meeting, which will be October already? And Michael, just because you're so intimately involved with legislative stuff, I'm kind of curious to hear what you think in terms of is that timing, if we get together at the end of October and have a conversation about what our legislative agenda should be, does that timing work out in terms of having an impact? And Robin, in terms of the group that you're involved in, what's their timeline to develop a legislative agenda? Is there even time for us to do this?
So the shared legislative, jumping right in, the shared legislative group partnership will meet, like I said, their first meeting is October 18th. And we will start right away at identifying items that we collectively want to put on the shared agenda. I would, at the October 18th meeting, just because I bring something forward doesn't mean it's going to get onto the shared agenda, which is why I am suggesting that the city representatives also advocate for continued funding for housing and affordable housing and supportive housing be part of the agenda that we jointly put forward. So October 18th is their meeting.
Right.
And then the agenda is developed over the next couple of months so that it's ready. We have meetings with the membership of the House, our delegation of the House and Senate at state. That usually, I want to say that happens either in December or early January. I remember a cold and rainy night last year when I went to meet with the members, but it moves pretty fast.
But you start October 18th. So if we as a group said, yeah, we want to bring some priorities forward, you could go to them and say, by the way, something's coming from the RHC for us to consider.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Anybody else? Michael, do you want to add anything to it?
No, I don't think so. I think that the process that Robin laid out makes the most sense. By way of timing, I don't think October is too late. I think it's when you're talking about specific projects that when you don't have the details ironed out, that's when you get a lot of wrinkles, right? Like if you're not able to describe this is what the physical plant is going to look like. This is how many beds will be in there. Like, we don't have all those details by October, then that would be really challenging for like a capital campaign. That's different than like an operating budget ask where you're like, I want to continue these things that have already existed.
Right.
So just to put a bow on all this, I think that we could have that conversation next month to say what are our top 1, 2, 3, priorities that we would like to see out of the legislature, not being project specific. Robin, you could flag to the regional group that we will be having that conversation and making a recommendation to them. I think that's a fine approach to take. I'd be curious to hear from, in between now and then, if the tech team, as you all get together, talk about what you all think we should consider. I think that would help the process a lot.
Okay, I see Jacinda with a raised hand.
Thank you, Chair Cox. Yeah, just wanted to offer, I guess, if this group is interested or any of you individually to meet or discuss more about our 228 Olympia project at the corner of Franklin and Olympia downtown. Aligns with several regional goals. That is one that was covered earlier in this agenda with an ask to right-of-way if funding, became available. But if we kind of go down this path that we may consider project specific support, or if any of you are just interested, I wanted to throw that out there that I would love to share more about that project.
Thanks, Jacinda. Andy Ryder, are you still on? Andy? I know he's been involved in these a lot, but looks like he's got something else going here. So I guess, do we have interest in moving forward with, having Robin take kind of to the October meeting? Hey, the Regional Housing Council is a pretty new group. They're, they really want to have, a push for funding to sustain the big shelters that we have right now and keep going from there, as well as wraparound services and rental assistance. Just more of a general push for money. Maybe we come up with a dollar amount and get a little more specific at our October meeting and have her take it back and at their next session.
That sounds good to me, to have some time on the next agenda to talk about high-level priorities. And as Jacinda suggested, if there is a project that we know has a gap in funding, that we could add to that list, that's something we could also discuss next month.
Okay. Are our other voting members okay with that? All right. And Robin, do you have enough to work with? Or would you like?
No, I think I'm good. Thank you.
Good. All right. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. Next is the home ARP allocation plan update, and that's Tom.
All right, thank you. So this group may recall that earlier this year, it was probably January, February, we have received an allocation under the home ARP program of about $3 million under the federal home program. So separate from a lot of the ARPA money that the cities and the county have. And so we had to submit an allocation plan, which was submitted in March, I believe, of this year. And as part of that plan, we had a public hearing, we talked to our providers, a consultation period. And with that plan, we had determined, or we proposed, to essentially minus the 5% admin that we're taking, to split the funds between affordable rental housing development and services activities. So that was about 1.5 million for each of those activities. At that time, we allocated the money to services because we were very concerned that there was going to be a substantial funding gap with the reduction of document and recording fees from document recording fees. We weren't sure what we were going to get from the state, so we wanted to allocate those funds to help alleviate any potential funding gap we were receiving. Since then, as we've talked about, the state has largely filled that gap. And so we are able to basically fund our services. You can always use more dollars for services, so there's never enough money for services. But by and large, we were able to fund our services at the level we had previously funded, and even perhaps a little bit more than we'd funded in previous years. And so also after further guidance from HUD around how to implement the home ARP funds, it is clear that service agencies that receive home ARP funds would have to make some substantial changes to our coordinated entry system and their internal processes to use those funds, because there's qualifying populations that don't necessarily line up identically with coordinated entry. So this would be a reasonably heavy lift for our service providers to accept these dollars. So after some internal discussion, we decided that the cost benefits no longer make sense to use. Yes, 1.5 million over 3 years is not nothing, but it's not a massive amount of money for our system. So what we are looking to do is shift to use all of the home ARP dollars to fund affordable housing rental development. As you know, through our recent RFP this summer, we put out an RFP. We had $5.5 million to award. We received 14 million in requests. So there's certainly sufficient demand for rental housing dollars. So what we're planning to move forward with is having a public hearing. We're going to be going to the Board of County Commissioners to set a public hearing to amend the home ARP allocation plan to allocate the full amount of our resources to affordable housing development. So we've got to have a 30-day public comment period. So that we'll be putting out our amended plan in mid-October and holding the public hearing in mid-November. So wanted to let this group know, answer any questions or concerns that folks had. But we think this is really going to alleviate an unnecessary burden on some of our providers and also provide additional funding for affordable housing rental development. So.
Okay, questions for Tom? Anyone? Okay, looks like you sold us. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
And let's move on to good of the order. I think, Tom, you had one thing you wanted to bring forward.
I do. And so this was at our executive team meeting. Commissioner Mejia, or Vice Chair Mejia, who couldn't be here. As everyone believes knows, Ramiro Chavez is leaving the county. And so he was instrumental in working on the RHC. And so the chair and vice chair asked us to put together a resolution recognizing the contributions of Ramiro to the RHC. So we have drafted a resolution that wanted to read for this. So a resolution recognizing the contributions of Ramiro Chavez to the Regional Housing Council and expressions of gratitude and appreciation for his leadership and vision in addressing issues of affordable housing and homelessness as a regional issue that requires support from all Thurston County jurisdictions, and thanks and admiration for his role in strengthening cooperation among cities and the county to respond to these issues faced by the region. Whereas Thurston County is a founding member of the Regional Housing Council, which represents a model for interjurisdictional cooperation and coordination that recognizes that the challenges of affordable housing and homelessness are regional in nature. And whereas Ramiro Chavez, as Thurston County Manager, has been an active participant in the Regional Housing Council since it was established. And whereas Ramiro Chavez was instrumental in navigating negotiations to develop an interlocal agreement, creating the Regional Housing Council, that all 5 partner jurisdictions were able to approve. And whereas Ramiro Chavez has advocated for and supported the use of county resources for regional projects supported by the Regional Housing Council, now therefore the Regional Housing Council resolves all that the Regional Housing Council recognizes the contributions of Ramiro Chavez for his leadership, guidance, and vision in working regionally to create more affordable housing opportunities and for youth homelessness for the betterment of the entire Thurston County region.
So basically what we're asking for here is your blessings to present this to Ramiro at the send-off for him coming up on, was it the 2nd?
Yep, it's on Monday.
October 2nd. So we have a quick, maybe
Wait, when you say our blessings, do you mean a vote? I would think something titled a resolution would be a vote. In Olympia, a proclamation doesn't require a vote, a resolution does, just process wise.
Well, we're not Olympia, but if you want to go ahead and have a formal vote, we can do that. So could I hear a motion to approve the proclamation?
I move we approve the proclamation.
Second.
All right. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We have ourselves a resolution. And I hope we don't have a revolution. Thank you. So who else has something for good of the order that they'd like to share in our waning minutes here? Brian?
Yes, I want to share that for the city of Yelm, within a industrial area, we just recently passed a text to code for 55 plus rental units. So there's an individual that has some property. They're going to be wanting to set that up. It goes along with a lot of the other things that we have within our industrial area that support senior citizens, the more mature. I'm not sure what to call myself anymore, but just wanted to share that. One of the things that hopefully we can work out with that as it gets developed is working with Intercity Transit to be able to provide a bus route or a stop in that area so that then it becomes a really nice living facility for people 55 and older.
Good to know. And just as a former transit authority member, I would get your ask in early because it takes a lot for Intercity Transit to start a new route. And they're still struggling even to get enough drivers to serve what they have. So
Right. I'm on the board and I understand that. So as I said, that's what I'm going to put out.
Cool. That's great. Okay, Darian.
Yeah, just an announcement. The city and Catholic Community Services applied for a grant with the Department of Justice in April. And this was to help add additional support to the Arrest and Jail Alternatives Program to provide substance use disorder support and mental and behavioral health support and case management. And we received word yesterday that we received the $1 million grant, the $1 million grant to increase the support for Arrest and Jail Alternatives over the next 3 years. So just sharing that it was a success. It's great. Really excited. Contract will be starting by the end of the year. So excited for that resource in our community.
Awesome. That's really good news. Anybody else have something they'd like to share? Crosby?
I actually just had a clarifying question. I didn't catch where the Yelm project was going in. I heard it, but then I wasn't really sure geographically where, and I was curious.
Where the project is going to be going in, I think it's Railroad Roten Road area. If you go down, you go past the auto wrecking, and then you come down towards the community. There's property in that area that the person will be developing for that. It's on the north side.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else? Alrighty. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. And all right. Thanks, everybody. I don't think there's going to be any objections, but if we could have a second and an aye, that would be great. I'll second. All in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you. It's been an interesting meeting, and we'll look forward to seeing you in October. And we'll be back at the atrium in October. Okay. All right. See you then. Thanks. And thank you, Robin. And welcome to the bunch here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.